This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for building a beautiful website and growing your online presence. More on them later. First shalt thou take out the holy pin, then shalt thou count to 3, no more, no less. 3 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 3. So reads the instruction manual for the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch, used to defeat the killer rabbit in the film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Some people might have assumed that Antioch was a made-up place, like many other locations in the movie, but that just goes to show you how little people actually know about a city that was once among the largest and most influential in the world. 2,000 years ago, Antioch was considered the Rome of the East, a huge metropolis that was a center for trade, culture, and military power. Some of the earliest converts to Christianity lived in Antioch. In fact, it is believed to be the place where the term Christian was first invented. It was the centerpiece of great kingdoms and fought over by people of different faiths, until a combination of war and natural disasters left nothing but ruins in the wake of the once great city. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died at the age of 33, throwing the great empire he had conquered over the previous decade into turmoil. His generals, known as the Diadochi, meaning successors, tore the empire apart, each struggling to get the largest piece of the pie for themselves. One of these generals that emerged from the wars of the Diadochi was Seleucid, who arose from satrap of Babylon to form a great kingdom, the Seleucid Empire. Like all of the rulers of the successor kingdoms that took power in regions conquered by Alexander from the Persians, Seleucus wanted to attract immigrants from Greece and Macedon to his empire in the east, knowing that it would strengthen trade as well as his hold on power. So he founded a number of new cities in strategic locations throughout his new kingdom. One of these new cities was founded in the western part of Syria on the Orontes River. It was named Antioch, either after Seleucus' father or his son, both of whom were named Antiochus. The original city was constructed on an island created when the Orontes briefly split before joining back together, a natural fortification and source of fresh water. It was later expanded to the eastern bank of the river on a narrow strip of land between the Orontes and the Nur Mountains. Antioch became the most important city in the Seleucid Empire relatively quickly. From 240 BC, Antioch was the kingdom's capital, and the Seleucid kings spent lavishly on the city. Not all of it was by choice. The frequent earth tremors in the area necessitated regular rebuilding and repairing of damage. In fact, the earliest surviving written record of the destruction wrought by an earthquake was recorded in 148 BC in Antioch. The city's population was a mix of Greek and Macedonian settlers as well as locals. This included a large population of Jews who had their own quarter in the city. Antioch was famous throughout the Greek-speaking world. The only city in the east that could match it was Alexandria, the seat of power of the Seleucids' great rivals, Ptolemaic Egypt. According to Cicero, a populous city full of most erudite men and rich in the most liberal studies. However, not many records from the Hellenistic period have survived, leaving most of the city's history during the Seleucid era the subject of historical conjecture. The Seleucid Empire declined dramatically in the 2 centuries after it was founded, thanks largely to a series of disastrous wars and internal dynastic struggles over the crown. By the time the Roman Republic annexed Antioch in 64 BC, the kingdom was all but gone. The Romans fell in love with Antioch almost from the start of their reign there, particularly after the transition to the empire. The Caesars, starting from Augustus, decided to make it the capital of the eastern part of their territory. It's not hard to see why. It was centrally located and massive for an ancient city. Historical estimates for the size of its population range from 250,000 to 500,000 inhabitants, making it the third largest city in the empire after Rome and Alexandria. The emperors spent lavishly on construction projects in the city, including new city walls meant to fend off incursions by the neighboring Parthian Empire, as well as a Roman-style forum, bathhouses, and aqueducts. In essence, it was a smaller version of Rome itself. One of the most popular of the new buildings was the racetrack. Chariot racing was the favorite sport of the Romans, even more popular than gladiatorial fights. A huge hippodrome, the Circus of Antioch, was constructed in the city, which became the place to be on race days. The racetrack, modeled on the Circus Maximus in the imperial capital, could hold 80,000 spectators, many of whom were accused of drunkenness and unruly behavior. Fights in the stands and even rioting were not unheard of events, a subtle reminder that, though they may have lived 2,000 years ago, they weren't really that different from us. Like the Seleucids before them, the Romans found themselves frequently rebuilding Antioch as a result of seismic activity. In 37 AD, the Emperor Caligula sent 2 senators to report on conditions in the city following an earthquake there. Indeed, another earthquake hit during the reign of his successor, Claudius. One of the best documented, though, came in 115 AD, while Trajan was wintering in Antioch during his war with the Parthians. Estimated at an extreme 7.5 magnitude event, the earthquake destroyed virtually the entire city, with a death toll believed to be in the hundreds of thousands. Trajan barely escaped with his life, taking shelter with his retinue in the open-air hippodrome for fear of aftershocks. But one of his consuls, Marcus Paedo Virgilanius, was not as fortunate, and he was killed by falling debris. It took years to rebuild the city, and entire neighborhoods ended up abandoned because everyone who had lived there had been killed. Now, just a short word from today's video sponsor, Squarespace. If you've ever wanted to start a website but have been put off by the thought of complicated coding, then Squarespace is perfect for you. Building an online presence can be daunting, but no longer is advanced coding degree or a small fortune required to get started. Squarespace helps you stand out with a beautiful website which you can easily build with their drag and drop method, meaning anyone can have the website of their dreams in no time at all. Their platform provides you with powerful analytics and insights into who visits your site and how they interact with your content. Squarespace's analytics include page views, traffic sources, audience geography, and more. You can figure out what is drawing people in and then capitalize on that premium data that's provided to you. Squarespace comes with powerful blogging tools allowing you to share anything from stories, photos, and videos to simple updates for your fans. Connect your socials and automatically push website content to your social media channels, schedule your posts, and make your content work for you. The Squarespace members area feature makes it simple and easy for you to monetize your content in a way that fits with your brand. Unlock a new revenue stream for your business and sell exclusive access to gated content for your most dedicated customers. You can test it out before making any commitments. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your site, go to squarespace.com/geographics to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now back to today's video. Antioch had a sizable Jewish population that lived in their own quarter, the Keration. They spoke Greek rather than Aramaic or Hebrew and were less married to the traditions of Temple Judaism than their counterparts in Jerusalem. So it makes sense that it was here that some of the first Christian missionaries arrived following the death of Jesus Christ in the 1st century AD, seeking to convert the city's Jews to the new religion. Early evangelizers included one of Christ's disciples, Peter, who was the first bishop of Antioch before going on to become the first bishop of Rome, or Pope, as well as Barnabas and Paul, who are called apostles. Antioch was the first place that the followers of Christ were referred to as Christians, and it was also the first place that began actively converting non-Jews or Gentiles to the faith. The role of Gentiles within the Christian religion sparked a major dispute between Peter and Paul, known as the Incident at Antioch. This dispute over how much of the Jewish religion should be carried over to the Christian one has never really been resolved and is the subject of considerable debate even today. Another important early church figure is Ignatius of Antioch, who served as the city's bishop before being arrested, taken to Rome, and martyred by being fed to lions. His writings, especially his 7 epistles, are considered essential doctrine to the Christian faith. Antioch was considered so important to the foundations of the religion that it became known as the Cradle of Christianity. After Christianity was legalized and embraced by the Roman Empire, the city became part of the Pentarchy, the 5 holy sees whose patriarchs were to collectively run the Christian church alongside Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, and Alexandria. The question of religion was to dominate the city's politics and future for the rest of its existence. From 270 to 273 AD, Antioch was briefly part of the Palmyrene Empire, a breakaway state in Syria and Egypt led by Queen Zenobia, who hoped to take advantage of the turmoil of the rest of the Roman Empire to carve out her own kingdom. She was defeated by Emperor Aurelian in 273, and Antioch was reintegrated into the Roman system. The city outlasted the collapse of Rome and became part of the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire based out of Constantinople. But it was no match for the winds of plate tectonics. In 526, Antioch was rocked by another massive earthquake, this one even more destructive than the one in 115. Much like the San Francisco quake of 1906, the disaster started a fire which consumed almost every building that hadn't fallen down, burning people alive who were trapped in the rubble of their homes. Only the buildings close to the mountain survived. Estimates of the number of dead are placed as high as 300,000, one of the worst natural disasters in the history of mankind. In Constantinople, Emperor Justin is said to have wept when he heard of the disaster and immediately pledged to rebuild the city yet again. He and his heir, Justinian, spent vast sums on recovery efforts, but in 540, the city was captured by the Byzantine and Persian Empire, and its entire population was deported to a city in Mesopotamia whose name in Persian literally means better than Antioch. Justinian and the Byzantines recovered a city that was little more than a deserted pile of rubble. After that, the city was never the same again. It was never allowed to achieve its great Roman heights because every time it seemed on the verge of recovery, war again came to visit, bringing all its destructive tendencies along with it. The Sasanians captured the city again in 613, holding it until 627 when the Byzantines recovered it. 10 years later, it changed hands again, this time falling to the newly powerful Islamic State, the Rashidun Caliphate, who called the city Antakya. For 350 years, Antioch was on a hostile border between Muslims and Christians, and as a result, declined in importance both politically and economically. The Byzantines recaptured the city in 969 and lost it again in 1084. But the status quo was about to be shaken up completely in the region by one of the most climactic events in the history of the region. In 1095, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios asked for help from Pope Urban II, as his empire was under threat from Islamic forces in Anatolia. Urban, seeing a chance to reunify the Latin Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church following the Great Schism 40 years earlier, called for a crusade by the Western European states to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslims. A huge army, commanded by some of Europe's leading noblemen, crossed the Bosphorus Strait from Constantinople and rampaged through modern-day Turkey, arriving before the walls of Antioch in 1097. It may not have been an important economic center as it had been during Roman times, but the city's strategic position was still priceless. It was a near impregnable fortress that blocked the Crusader army from their ultimate goal, Jerusalem. The Crusaders were in a difficult position. They didn't have enough troops to either assault the city directly or to completely surround it to starve out the defenders. All through the winter and spring, the Crusader army besieged Antioch to no avail. Word reached them that a large army was marching to Antioch to relieve the city, and the Crusaders now realized that if they didn't take the city immediately, none of them would survive. An Armenian commander within the city named Firuz changed everything when he agreed to let the Crusaders into the city in exchange for money and a title. On the night of June the 2nd, Firuz lowered a rope ladder down the walls that he was responsible for, allowing a group of Crusaders inside to open a gate and let in the rest of the army. A great massacre of the city's inhabitants following the usual pattern of medieval siege warfare. The Turkish governor Yagi Siyan attempted to flee the city, but he was caught and beheaded. 2 days after capturing Antioch, the relief army, commanded by Kaboga, the Atabeg of Mosul, arrived and turned the tables on the Crusaders, besieging them inside of the city that they'd just captured. Unable to resupply, the Crusaders began to starve, resulting to eating most of their horses. On June the 28th, facing certain death or surrender, the Crusaders came out of the city and formed up to fight. Kaboga was initially confident, but he had underestimated the size of his enemy's army and his own subordinate commander's will to fight. The emirs began to desert him in the field, more concerned with weakening Kaboga's ability to conquer their own lands than defeating the Crusaders. The Turkish army was routed, a truly stunning victory for the Crusaders, who believed that it had been the will of God to justify the righteousness of their cause. Actually, their victory, as well as their shocking conquest of Jerusalem a year later, had been more attributable to rivalries in the Muslim world, both between individual commanders and regions, as well as the larger conflict between the Sunni Seljuks of Persia and the Shiite Fatimids of Egypt, who hated each other almost as much as the Christians. It caused them not to take the Crusader threat seriously, meaning none of them were able to unite a large enough force to stop them until it was too late. But of course, there was no telling the Crusaders that. Rather than returning the captured territories to the Byzantine Empire as originally promised, the noble leadership of the First Crusade instead divided up amongst themselves, creating 4 Crusader states: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the country of Tripoli, the country of Edessa, and the Principality of Antioch. The new Prince of Antioch was Bohemond of Taranto, a Norman Italian lord who used his new position to attack his former ally, the Byzantines, until he was finally defeated by Alexios and forced to sign a peace treaty that made Antioch a vassal state of Constantinople. After he died, his successors renounced the treaty and the Principality would have fraught relations with the Byzantines for the entirety of its existence. Under the prince were the grand officers, the most important of which were the constable, the head of the army, and the marshal, his second-in-command, who were given elevated status considering the almost constant state of warfare that Crusader Antioch was in. There was also a seneschal, who managed the kingdom's finances and other domestic affairs, and a chamberlain, who managed the royal household. These were essentially the same officers that governed nations back in Europe, where the Crusaders originated, although as time passed and native-born princes replaced those from Europe, the roles taken on by various officials changed and were in general much more fluid than those in Europe. The Crusader states were in a precarious position, surrounded by enemies, subject to court intrigue and backstabbing by their own nobility. If the Muslim territories that surrounded them ever united under one ruler, they would be in serious danger, and this is exactly what happened in the 1180s as a new power rose in the region. Saladin had become Sultan of Egypt, overthrowing the Fatimids, then went on to conquer both Damascus and Aleppo to become Sultan of Syria as well. He now controlled all the territory to the south and east of the Crusader states, and promised his people a jihad, a holy war, to reclaim the Holy Land of Jerusalem from the Franks, as the Crusaders were known. In 1187, Saladin's army destroyed the army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem at the Battle of Hattin and soon after captured the Holy City itself. Saladin's troops swept over most of the Crusader states, and it looked like total defeat for the Franks. But Antioch was saved just in time by the arrival of the Third Crusade, led by the kings of England and France. The Principality was now nothing but a shadow of what it had once been, alongside a greatly reduced Kingdom of Jerusalem based out of Acre and the country of Tripoli that Edessa had been captured in 1146. After the death of Saladin in 1193, his successors tore his lands apart in a vicious civil war, while what was left of the Crusader states were viewed as little more than an annoyance. The arrival of the Mongols in the Middle East shifted the balance of power as the Muslims came under attack by the successors of Genghis Khan. The Principality of Antioch agreed to become a vassal state of the Mongol Empire in order to protect themselves, but this angered the head of the Mamluk Sultanate that was growing in power in Egypt and Syria. Baybars, who became sultan in 1260 after assassinating his predecessor, set out to systematically wipe out every remaining Crusader garrison in the region. His army surrounded Antioch in 1268. The defenders fought bravely to defend their city, but they were undercut by poor leadership. The prince, Bohemond VI, never even left Tripoli, which he also ruled, to attempt to relieve the siege. The fall of Antioch is described as one of the most vicious massacres in the whole history of the Crusades. The Mamluks engaged in an orgy of violence that consumed the entire city. 17,000 people were put to the sword, while the rest of the city's inhabitants, and 100,000, were sold into slavery. Then, Baybars ordered every building set ablaze. All that was left was a smoking ruin, devoid of people. What was left of the Crusader states did not long survive the city of Antioch. The last outpost was taken in 1291, ending an almost 200-year-long struggle between Christians and Muslims over the Holy Land. Antioch never recovered as a large city, and it would be captured one more time by the Ottoman Empire in 1517. Today, a large Turkish city, Antakya, stands on the ruins of the Hellenistic Antioch, and most historians consider it a successor city rather than a continuation of the original settlement founded in 300 BC. Today, few traces of Antioch remain standing, except for sections of the mighty city wall up on the mountainside to the east and the Church of St. Peter, one of the oldest churches in Christianity. The church is one of the final resting places for the remains of Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor who drowned while traveling to the Holy Land to participate in the Third Crusade. Archaeological digs have unearthed some traces of the old city, including a Greek mosaic from the 3rd century BC found in 2016, depicting a drunk skeleton under the message, "Be cheerful, enjoy your life." But historians are worried that as Antakya expands, modern construction will destroy the remains of Antioch still buried underneath. It is amazing to think that a city that was once so important to so many people for so long could simply vanish from the face of the earth. In the end, it seems, Antioch was conquered one too many times, consigned to the pages of history and the occasional Monty Python reference.